Hi there, knitters. Welcome to episode 57 of Knit Talk with a Tech Editor. I'm Megan of the Unapologetic Knitter, and I'm a tech editor. Today's video... Okay, first I need to address the fact that I have not actually been crying. Right before I sat down to shoot this video, I put on some mascara and I stabbed myself in the eye with the wand. That's just the way it goes. Maybe it's not that obvious to you, but I feel like my eye is super puffy. Okay, so let's get down to the heart of today's episode. This is going to be a really quick one, and for many people who have been here for a while, it may seem very beginner friendly compared to a lot of the topics that I have touched on in past years. But because the basis of this whole podcast was emails that I see from knitters on a regular basis, I thought it would be really useful to just talk briefly about stitch orientation on your knitting needle. It's not something that is intuitive to everybody, so I thought a really brief demonstration of what that looks like would be really helpful. It also doesn't hurt that today's topic is really brief because we decided this year to renovate our landscaping. Now, you may not be able to tell this from my window, but this is a one-story home. So when we have our landscaping done, like renovated, that means they are right outside my window, and it could be any second that a chainsaw starts up or a compactor. Today we're expecting them to be putting in a retaining wall, and they've been digging and excavating for where the wall is going to be sitting, and every so often the compactor goes by, so it gets really loud. So we are going to try and go through this really quickly, just looking at stitches and what a twisted stitch versus a non-twisted stitch looks like. But at the end of the episode, I'm going to do a giveaway. As we have just completed election season, I think a little bit of sharing the love would be a good thing. So stick around. We're going to do a giveaway. All right, let's take a look at a top-down swatch of what a good, I don't know how to say it, not good practice, but just how to get your stitches mounted back on your needle, especially if you've had to frog your work. So I thought we could use a really simple swatch to look at the orientation of our stitches on the needles. It doesn't really matter what this fabric is. This could be a much more complicated fabric, but I think it's simplest to show it over stockinette stitches. All of the center stitches have been knit normally with the stitches in the correct orientation, except for this stitch right here and this stitch right here. It's a very small difference between the two stitches. I'm going to try and get my camera to focus on the fabric here. If we look at this stitch where we've got the stitch was knit twisted, you can see that this leg is sitting in front of this leg. That's how I know that it was worked twisted. If we look at the adjacent stitch, the two legs do not cross each other, whereas this stitch, one leg crosses in front of the other. That's how I know it was twisted. So if we look really closely at the orientation of a stitch on the needle, I'm just going to go in a couple of stitches since I think it's easier to look at it on a plain stockinette background. The orientation of a stitch is going to be the reversed if you're a left-handed knitter versus a right-handed knitter, as far as I understand it. But what we're looking for is the leading leg. So the right or the front leg in front of the needle is going to be the right leg. If we pulled this stitch open so that it was flat, I'm not sure how to show you this. If we pulled it open so that it was flat and was a V, it would be the right side of that V. So if you have to tink or frog your work and need to put the stitch back on your needle, you want to make sure that that front leg is the right side of the loop. If we have it the opposite way, so that the left leg is in front, when we knit into that stitch, it twists the stitch, and not only does it feel really awkward, I can feel how tight that is, but that's where we end up with our crossed legs. The stitch now has a cross in front of it, whereas its adjacent stitch does not have it crossed. So that is the simple orientation of a stitch. Let's just talk really briefly, and this is going to be rudimentary for some people, but let's just talk really briefly about knitwise versus purlwise when we're entering a stitch. When we knit a stitch, instructions would have us go into the front of a stitch, which means you're crossing the face of the stitch and inserting your needle, I guess, from left to right into the front of it. Purlwise is the opposite. We go from right to left behind that front loop. And what that does is prevents the stitch from twisting. But what about when we have a stitch that needs to be knit through the back loop? For knitting, it almost feels like we're inserting our stitch purlwise because we're coming from right to left, but we're going through the back of the stitch. So we're actually going to be twisting that stitch. Oop, that went out of focus. We're going to go through the back of a stitch behind the left-hand needle. When it comes to going into a stitch purlwise through the back loop, it's a whole other mechanical procedure, and I'm going to try to do this in focus. You almost turn your needles parallel and insert your needle through the back loop that's on the back side of your work. So your needles are parallel, and then you twist it and you wrap your yarn around the needle like that. Okay, so totally short and sweet. Hopefully just helps you take a little bit of a closer look at your stitches when you're putting them back on your needle, and making sure that, say, if you're casting on stitches, like using the cable cast on or the knitted cast on method, that they're getting placed on your needle in the right orientation. Now, let's get down to a giveaway. So first of all, this is my 5th book that I have edited with Tanis Gray, and with each edit that I do, I get editor copies. So I have 3 copies of this Gilmore Girls book. This released October 22nd. It is available in many yarn shops and of course on Amazon for you to purchase. There are some absolutely gorgeous patterns in this book. So here's what we're going to do to have you enter. And before I even go into that, let me just say that this is going to be for US residents only. I hope you don't mind. I'm sure some of you will, but shipping is pretty expensive and this will be on my dime. So I would love to ship out 3 copies of this book to US residents. Okay, so here's what I want you to do to enter. I would love you to go to Ravelry.com. I'm going to have a link in the description below, and go to the project page on Ravelry for the Gilmore Girls book. Go through the patterns and come back here and leave me a link to the pattern that you would most love to knit from the book, along with the designer's name, because credit where credit is due, and I will enter your name in the drawing. Our next video, so in 2 weeks' time, I will announce the winners. So today is the 13th, Wednesday the 27th. So Wednesday the 27th, in our next video, I will be announcing the winners. So let's say that you have to have your entry in by the Sunday, which let's just check what that date would be. So Sunday, November 24th. Make sure you've got your entry listed in the comments below, and we'll do a random drawing to see who our lucky 3 recipients are going to be. Okay, so real quick before they start up the work again outside, in 2 weeks' time, when I do the drawing, we are going to do a bit of a conversation about garment styles. This is something that I've had several emails about, but I have always felt a little hesitant to speak about it because it is largely based on my opinion. Everybody is unique, and everybody's self-comfort in the garments they put on those bodies is unique. But I've had enough emails asking me to speak about it that I think it's worth talking about. So next week, we will look at common garment types, and I'm talking sweaters or cardigans, and perhaps how they might fit on different bodies and what method of construction might be most successful for different types of bodies. Okay, so I hope you will join me in 2 weeks. Thank you for joining me today. As always, it's an honor for me to get to spend time with you. And again, as always, happy knitting.